This is the moment everything changes. At exactly 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, February 13th, 2026, President Trump stood in the Oval Office and delivered what may be the most consequential ultimatum of his presidency. If they don't make a deal, he told reporters, it's going to be very traumatic. And this wasn't just words. Within hours, the Pentagon confirmed that the USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's largest and most advanced aircraft carrier, was being deployed to the Middle East. America is now positioning two massive carrier strike groups within striking distance of Iran. The diplomatic window is closing. The military option is becoming operational reality. To understand the gravity of this moment, we need to trace how we got here. On February 6, 2026, in the capital of Oman, a historic meeting took place. For the first time in Trump's second term, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi sat across from U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff for indirect negotiations. But this wasn't just another diplomatic meeting. The U.S. delegation included Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, and for the first time, CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper, a senior military official. The presence of a top military commander at nuclear talks sent an unmistakable message. America was negotiating with one hand while positioning military assets with the other. Both sides described the February 6th talks as a good start. But the fundamental deadlock remains unchanged. The Trump administration has made it crystal clear that Iran cannot be allowed to enrich uranium at any level. This is non-negotiable. Iran's response has been equally firm. President Masoud Pezeshkian, speaking to massive crowds in Tehran on February 11th during the 47th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, declared that while Iran is not seeking nuclear weapons and is ready for any kind of verification, they will never surrender their right to uranium enrichment. This is Iran's red line, and it directly contradicts Trump's core demand. Here's where the crisis accelerates. Trump has set a timeline that makes compromise nearly impossible. On Thursday, when asked about his deadline for reaching an agreement, he said, "I guess over the next month, something like that. It should happen quickly. They should agree very quickly. 1 month." That's the window Trump has given Iran to abandon a nuclear program they've spent decades developing and consider essential to their sovereignty. The military pressure is now undeniable. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group has been positioned in the Arabian Sea since January, following Iran's bloody crackdown on nationwide protests that began in late December 2025. Human rights organizations report thousands killed in the regime's suppression of demonstrations, with casualty estimates ranging from 6,000 to 30,000. Trump had warned Iran to stop killing protesters, saying, "Help is on the way to the Iranian people." The Lincoln deployment was the first signal that America was willing to back those words with force. Now comes the Gerald R. Ford. This isn't just any warship, it's the largest aircraft carrier ever built, powered by nuclear reactors that give it virtually unlimited range. Its air wing includes FA-18 Super Hornet fighters, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, E-2D Hawkeye early warning systems, and MH-60 helicopters. The Ford generates enough energy to power a city of 100,000 people. Its defense systems include state-of-the-art missile launchers and anti-missile batteries. When it arrives in the Persian Gulf in 3 to 4 weeks, it will join the Lincoln to create the most concentrated U.S. naval firepower in the region in years. The Ford's deployment represents a dramatic shift in Trump's strategic focus. The carrier was originally sent to the Caribbean in October 2025 as part of the military buildup that led to the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Trump's national security strategy emphasizes the Western Hemisphere, yet he's now pulling his most advanced military assets away from that region and concentrating them against Iran. This signals that Iran has become Trump's top priority, even above hemispheric security. The timing is critical for another reason. The Ford has been deployed since late June 2025, meaning its crew has been away from home port for almost 8 months. Naval officials, including Admiral Daryl Cottle, have warned about overworking the warship and its crew. Yet Trump is extending their deployment indefinitely. This decision tells us something crucial about the administration's calculations. They believe military action against Iran is not just possible, but likely within weeks. Iranian officials clearly understand the escalating threat. Since the February 6th talks, Iran has engaged in intense diplomatic activity. Foreign Minister Aragchi has traveled to Turkey, meeting with President Erdogan and Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan. Ali Larijani, head of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, has been conducting shuttle diplomacy with regional allies. On January 31st, Larijani posted on social media that, contrary to the artificially manufactured media war narrative, the formation of a framework for negotiations is progressing. But progress toward what? Iran continues to refuse America's core demand. Here's the strategic trap Iran faces. They need negotiations to prevent military strikes, but they cannot accept terms that would end their nuclear program. Meanwhile, America needs Iran to capitulate completely but cannot appear weak by accepting anything less than total uranium enrichment cessation. This creates a dynamic where both sides are talking but moving toward collision rather than compromise. The international implications are staggering. Gulf Arab states have repeatedly warned that military action could trigger another regional conflict in the Middle East, still reeling from the Israel-Hamas war in Gaza. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with Trump on Wednesday and is pressing the administration to include Iran's ballistic missile program and support for militant groups like Hamas and Hezbollah in any nuclear agreement. This would make a deal even more impossible for Iran to accept. If negotiations collapse and military action begins, the consequences would be catastrophic. Iran would likely use its remaining missile arsenal to target Israel and U.S. bases throughout the region. They could also strike oil infrastructure and potentially mine the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 1/5 of global oil passes. Such action would send oil prices skyrocketing and trigger a global economic crisis on top of military conflict. Iran's domestic situation adds another layer of urgency. The regime is facing the most serious internal challenge since the 1979 revolution. Families of those killed in the recent crackdown are beginning to hold traditional 40-day mourning ceremonies. Videos circulating online show mourners gathering across the country, holding portraits of the dead and singing "Ey Iran," a patriotic song from the 1940s that has become a symbol of resistance. The regime fears that continued internal unrest combined with external military pressure could threaten its survival. This is why Iran's leaders are desperately trying to balance negotiations with deterrence. An Iranian official told Reuters on February 2nd that Iran wants the United States to remove its military assets from the Middle East before engaging in serious talks. This demand is obviously impossible for America to accept while building up forces for potential strikes. CNN reported that progress toward renewed negotiations appeared to have stumbled, partly due to U.S. unwillingness to reduce its military presence. Iran is essentially asking America to abandon its leverage before negotiations even begin. The Trump administration's position is equally inflexible. A White House fact sheet released last week states that Trump has never wavered in his stance that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. The document references Operation Midnight Hammer, military strikes conducted in June 2025 that obliterated Iran's nuclear facilities and significantly set back Tehran's nuclear ambitions. But those strikes, coordinated with Israel during their 12-day conflict, did not end Iran's program. Intelligence assessments suggest Iran has been working to reconstitute and harden its nuclear infrastructure since then. Multiple sources now confirm that a second round of U.S.-Iran talks is expected next week, though no official date has been set. Swiss authorities announced that Geneva will host the discussions, marking a shift from Oman. But the change in venue cannot mask the fundamental incompatibility of positions. Former four-star Army General Jack Keane, speaking on Sunday, predicted that if diplomacy fails, military action would be much larger than Israel's previous strikes, compressed and with the United States participating as well, something that would be quite formidable, that would put the regime clearly on a pathway to regime collapse. The economic markets are already reflecting this tension. Oil prices have been volatile amid concerns about Strait of Hormuz disruptions. Defense contractors are seeing increased activity as the Pentagon builds up regional assets. The Iranian rial continues to weaken under the pressure of existing sanctions and uncertainty about potential military action. What makes this crisis different from previous U.S.-Iran standoffs is the convergence of multiple pressure points. Iran faces massive internal protests, a crippled economy, damaged nuclear infrastructure, and now the most concentrated U.S. military threat in decades. America has a president who previously withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal and authorized strikes against Iranian assets. Unlike previous diplomatic crises that dragged on for months or years, this confrontation has a compressed timeline that makes miscalculation more likely. Trump's warning that failure to reach agreement would be very traumatic for Iran was not diplomatic language. It was a direct threat backed by overwhelming military force. The deployment of the Ford Carrier Strike Group transforms that threat into operational capability. Within 4 weeks, America will have positioned enough firepower in the Persian Gulf to devastate Iran's military and nuclear infrastructure within hours of receiving attack orders. Iranian leaders understand this reality. Their diplomatic outreach to Turkey, Qatar, and Oman represents a desperate attempt to find intermediaries who can broker a face-saving compromise. But compromise requires both sides to give ground, and neither appears willing to retreat from core positions. Iran will not abandon uranium enrichment. America will not accept anything less than complete cessation. This leaves military action as the most likely outcome unless someone blinks in the next few weeks. Trump has publicly set a 1-month timeline. The Ford will be in position within that time frame. Iranian domestic pressure is intensifying daily as mourning ceremonies continue. The diplomatic window is narrowing to a matter of days, not weeks. The next round of talks in Geneva may be the last chance to prevent a military confrontation that could reshape the entire Middle East. But based on the positions both sides have staked out, those talks appear more likely to provide final confirmation that diplomacy has failed rather than produce the breakthrough needed to prevent conflict. When the USS Gerald R. Ford reaches the Persian Gulf, it will carry more than advanced aircraft and missiles. It will carry America's final ultimatum to the Islamic Republic of Iran.